Hello, welcome to this core foundational concept of our Family Empowerment Now course. First of all, we're thrilled to have you participating in the course, and we are really grateful for the work that you're doing on behalf of your loved one or your clients or family members. It makes the world a better place when we are all trying to work together and for the betterment of other people. And so before we go any further, let me just thank you all for the work that you do. So let's dive right into this foundational session. This is one of our 3 foundational sessions, and this one is all about courage. I want to talk to you about your strength and your courage and where you get your inner resolve from. And this, like everything else in our course, is designed to help you to gain more confidence and more decisiveness and more momentum. So the first question that we need to think about is, where exactly does this courage come from? I mean, how do we start to gain more confidence and more courage in our lives? And the answer we find, it does not lie within moments of acute crisis, but instead it really is in how we live each and every day of our lives. And it's not supposed to be about jumping out of airplanes. It's not running into burning buildings. It's about our commitment to our convictions and remaining consistent and congruent to our values. So it's important that we define these values, and we need to identify our commitments regularly in order to define and understand where we may need to focus our work in the area of courage and strength. So I'm going to read a quote to you now that I want you to consider for a second. It's one of my favorites, and it's part of the materials that you'll receive as part of this course. But the quote is this: "We may perform works of benevolence and kindness that are, quote, acceptable to God and approved of by men," end quote, which require but little self-sacrifice or self-denial. But when duty calls us to engage in such that are unpopular, and in the discharge of which we risk the loss of friendship of those we love to be faithful therein, requires more devotion to principle and more firmness than many possess. And yet, it is the path which leads to the enjoyment of that peace and consolation which the world can neither give nor take away. That's pretty deep. So what is this saying? And again, you'll receive a written copy of this quote, so you don't have to memorize it right now or anything. But what it's saying to me is that it's easy to address the things that are popular and that are easy to address, flavor of the month issues or topics. And we can all get behind causes that are popular and well publicized. But true courage, our true strength, shows when we stand out and we get out there on our own and we support maybe that which is unpopular or uncomfortable and unwelcome. You see, this quote was written by a guy by the name of Isaac Hopper in the 1840s. He was an abolitionist, and this was long before Martin Luther King had a dream and long before Rosa Parks rode on a bus. But the same view of courage applies to everyone who is dealing with a loved one with mental illness, because there is stigma attached. There are people who don't understand why we are so resolved and resolute in our desire to push and to take care of our loved ones and to overcome a mental illness that they may have. So think about that quote as we go forward. And the work that you're doing, again, may not be understandable to a lot of people, but it's part of who you are. It's part of your foundation, your makeup. And you need to stay resolved to that exactly. But as I said before, courage doesn't need to be grandiose. It doesn't need to be earth-shattering. In my earliest days of working in this field, I met a client and I sat down with him for almost an hour. And we discussed his life and we discussed his current circumstances and where he felt he was with regard to his own progress with his illnesses and whatnot. And when I was leaving the facility, the director came over to me and said, "Wow, that guy, we can't hardly get him out of his room He doesn't even like to sit down for groups and never mind have a one-to-one discussion like that. We can't even get him to say hello half the time. You did really great work there. And I remember thinking to myself, all I really did was talk to the guy. He's the one that had to demonstrate courage and strength and overcome whatever fears he has or insecurities or even paranoia about meeting and talking to me. And to me, it was just a great reminder that even the small victories in this journey are so valuable and can touch lives in ways that maybe we can't comprehend at the time. So just being there, just being here together, to take that first step in this chaotic and unpredictable world is a courageous step on your part, because it's showing your resolve and your commitment to learning more and doing better for yourself, your family, and your loved one. There's a term that you'll also find in your course materials that's really employed heavily by the U.S. military. It's VUCA, V-U-C-A, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I cannot think of a world that is better described as VUCA, V-U-C-A, than the world of a family who is dealing with mental illness and the professionals who are dealing with mental illness. Because every single minute of your lives, every single day of our lives, it's volatile and uncertain and very complex and always seems to be ambiguous. Now, make no mistake, I understand that some days taking action is going to be easier than other days. There's just no question about it. Some days you just won't want to get out of bed. You don't want to be there. You don't want to be present. But on those days in particular, this goes back to what I said before about making sure that we practice these habits and make them habits. Make this courage and this resolve a habit. Because on those days where you don't want to get out of bed, it's when you really got to dig deep and you got to find that courage and that resolve. At one point, a couple of years ago, a coach of mine asked me a real poignant question that really hit home with me, and I want to share it with you all right now, because I'm gonna refer back to this particular issue, and I want you all to think about this as we move forward. But on those days where you don't want to get up, on those days where you just feel that it's just not worth the fight, it's just a tough too tough, I can't handle it today. Ask yourself this very important question: what could happen today if I don't show up? What can happen if I don't show up today? As one of my clients said to me, I'm a mom. I am his mom. This is the hand that I've been dealt, and I'm playing it. Some days are harder than others, but together, we're in it to win it. And we're going to do that together, because that's what we do. And she shows up every day. So for many of you, maybe your level of performance has been good. You're happy with what you've been able to do, and you're all cool with it. And that's great. I give you a lot of credit. I applaud you. And it's time to get in touch with that and feel good and own it. Own who and what you are as a family member or as a parent. But, this is the most challenging, I think, the most challenging of all human conditions. So if you're doing really well with it, well, you are far ahead, and we all want to learn from you, and we could all learn how from each other. But it's also really time to be easy on yourself. Offer yourself a level of satisfaction. Offer yourself a level of forgiveness. Be assured that through all of this, you are good enough. Now, for those like the rest of us who are meandering sometimes and a bit confused and can't really stick to or get on a course of action, it's time to get focused. It's time to make your loved one or your client's loved ones the mission, the vision and the mission. This is not to say that it should be all consuming and every single thing that you do is going to focus around this one thing. In fact, I would pause here and say just the opposite. You need to remember to be good to yourself, because if you can't be good to yourself, you're never going to be good for the loved one that you care so much about. I mean, it's a fact of life that we do more for other people than we would ever think to do for ourselves. So the love and the bond of family secures that promise even stronger. And that's what we have to remind ourselves as professionals, as providers, as clinicians, that we're talking about a whole new level of caring, concern, and commitment here when we are talking about family. So as I search for the right profession or population or audience to share my messages with, I was possessed by a constant and nagging question. You know, who in the world has the most urgent and compelling needs that I can address? And that's why I'm speaking to you all today, because it took me a while to understand that the people that have the most urgent and compelling needs are family members. They are the ones that are directly impacted by mental illness. And again, it's our role as providers, as family members, as clinicians, to understand that and remember it, that the urgent and compelling need that we have is nothing compared to the compelling need that family members have and loved ones have. I mean, providers, we all care. We're all in this because we care. It's what we do. It's a path. It's a life that we've chosen. And we care. But the needs for your loved ones, recovery, safety, you know, are a blip on a screen compared to what family members have. So again, when it comes to working with family members or being a family member who's a leader and a courageous and a strong leader, remember to ask yourself that really important question. What if I don't show up today? What could happen if I don't show up today? You see, the most courageous actions that we have, they're taken after years of buildup, right? Many times after years of caring deeply and compassionately for somebody. That's the advantage that the family member has. And it's impossible to question that. It's impossible to say that it's not valuable or worth it. It is worth it. You are worth it. And your loved one is worth it. As challenges seem more overwhelming, and as challenges have seemed more desperate and more, you know, piled one on top of the other, what have you done so far? Every single one of you has overcome. Think about it. I know for sure that every single one of you struggled to get here. And guess what? You made it. You made it here today. You've grown stronger. You cope better. You're able to deal with people, complex systems, and complex care better. So in order to understand perhaps the initial question that I posed to you, you know, where does our courage and our strength come from? Maybe it's best if we take it the opposite way and say, what is it that we fear, right? We can understand our strength by maybe understanding what we can overcome, what fears we can overcome. You know, a lot of psychologists and folks in those areas want to couch it in terms of pain. You know, the human being is something like 10 times more likely to run away from things that cause us pain, as opposed to running toward that pain and figuring out a way to fix it. It's an interesting dichotomy that we all share. But let's try to be a little bit aware of what we fear, because, I mean, outside of the dangerous situations, outside of, you know, a bear attacking us in the woods, or, you know, general safety and our health, science has more or less identified three things that we fear. The first one is this concept of loss pain. So we don't want the pain of loss. And what that means in the scientific world is that if we do something and we change something about ourselves, we're afraid that we're going to lose something that we value. And there's some really seemingly bizarre examples of this. I mean, there are actually people who have a fear of making more money or being more successful because they're afraid that if they change and they become more successful, well, maybe my friends won't like me anymore. Maybe I won't fit in with the group of people that I'm currently fitting in with. So, I mean, this is a very real thing that we all have to go through. I mean, that's an extreme example, but it's a very real example. Many of us, I think, have the fear of process pain. So this is number 2, process pain. And when we talk about process pain, basically what that says is, I just don't want to have to go through the work. I don't want to have to go through the workout every day. I don't want to have to, run the 5 miles a day. It's just the very act of changing is going to be hard work, and I don't know that I want that kind of pain in my life. The third type of pain is, well, maybe the grass isn't always green, right? We call this outcome pain. We're afraid that when we make a change and we go through all this work and we overcome the fear of loss, you know what? This, we look around ourselves and say, this is it. This is what I did all that work for. So we're afraid that it may not all be worth it in the end. So as we continue to move forward, I'd really like for you to think about these fears and think about which one of these fears resonates most with you. In fact, along those lines, I'm going to ask a couple of questions here that are not part of your coursework, but they're just part of these live sessions that we do with our teams and with our groups. So take some time and give some thought to these questions. You could pause the video anytime you want and give some real thought to these. And I'm just going to read them and hope that you will take some time to have that aha moment or that clarity, that understanding that we all look for. So here's a couple of questions that I'd like you to think about in this regard. Well, first of all, what do you tend to worry about or fear most in your life? Next question. Is there anyone in your life that you feel you're not being completely honest with regarding your feelings or your needs right now? How about, are there any people or situations in your life right now where you think that, I could be stepping it up a little bit better here. I could be doing a little bit more. You think there's any place in life where you should be showing up more, for instance? Think about what courage means to you and define it. And identify a time for me, if you could, when you were courageous, when you did step it up. What did that feel like? What were you doing then? And maybe one of the most important questions of all is this one. If you had more courage and more strength right now, if you got more resolve, what would you stop doing right now? I love that one because I think it's just so important that we consider all the things that we do. We're constantly going, we're constantly fighting, we're constantly moving forward. And sometimes we have to take time to stop some of the things that we're doing. So think about that. If you had the courage and strength, what would you stop doing right now? Okay, so let's move on from there. I want to introduce you to a concept that I've come across that I believe is actually another pain point or fear that, oddly enough, it's not typically discussed, but it's something that probably impacts about 99.9% of us, of the human beings, human race. It's called the addiction to the approval of others. And what this addiction basically holds is that many of us back off from achieving more. We back off from advocating for those that need us or advocating for things that we need because we're afraid of what others will think of us. or upsetting other people or rocking that apple cart. I mean, how many times have you not taken action because you're afraid of upsetting somebody else? You don't want to make waves, right? And then when you do step up, don't you very often find that you're given a renewed sense of power? That is your courage growing. That is the seed of your strength. It's growing like a baby in the womb. That's the feeling. That's you growing stronger. Now, this approval addiction fear, scientists actually will tell you, dates back all the way to the primordial being of human beings, our caveman ancestors, because back in those days, as is very true today, we're a very communal society. I mean, think about it. People were living in tribes and they were living in caves, and they needed each other for survival. If you didn't have another person, you were going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, plain and simple, right? So what you had to do is you had to work toward conforming. You had to work toward being accepted and approved by your other clanspeople, cave people, tribesmen, whatever the word may be. So we had to conform. It was literally a matter of life and death. And so the argument here is that this concept of the approval addiction is something that's really inherent. It's part of the human condition. So what does that mean for us today? I mean, I wonder how many of us are holding back from doing something that we know we want to do because we don't want to offend somebody. I mean, how many times do you not raise your hand in a room of people because you don't want to sound stupid, right? We just don't want to rock the boat. Well, I'm going to give you a checklist in your work this week that's going to have an amazing list of questions that is almost impossible to find that you are not addicted to the approval of others. So look for that in your course materials, and I think you really enjoy that worksheet just for the sake of what it will demonstrate to you about yourself. Now listen, we're all here together, okay? I'm here for you, my team is here for you. We're gonna continue to push and prod and pull each other along through this journey. You've got us now. You found us, you're here. This is legit, okay? Your loved one needs you to regain and find that courage and that strength that you've got inside of you. So let's all rally together and create our own movement in this regard. It's like an advocacy movement. Let's learn some new tools and reframe some of our old ones. And let's do this work together, supporting each other, offering insight, offering experience, offering experiences. And we all have different wisdoms that we could share. And we want to do this in the spirit of a love and support and collaboration. I don't want this to be just another group, just another support group, just another course. This is real life work for so many people. It's so very vital and so important. So happy that you're here with us. I hope you enjoyed this talk on courage. Please look at the worksheets. Please do your homework and get introspective about what it is that makes you tick. We're going to talk more about that in future weeks, but get there. Start to do some deep thinking around this because we need you. You got this. You got this. This is your time.